All right, well, I think we can get started now. It's a couple minutes past. So I'm Christian Sternke, one of the co-chairs of the IT Safety Council, along with Dan Brugman. And thank you for everyone for hopping on this meeting today. I guess we want to not sure he's on, don't think he's on, but want to just thank Dr. Robert Schneider for speaking last night at the IT section meeting, talked about pedestrian safety at night. Me and Dan weren't able to make it, but we did hear he gave a great presentation, and we're happy that he was able to speak on our behalf. Dan today is going to be speaking about RCUTs, just overall touching on what WisDOT has, giving info on what WisDOT has up with them now. So Dan, do you have anything else before you get started, or?
No, I'll just kind of just kick it off here. Just let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes.
All right. Great. 1 second. So yeah, here today to talk about RCUTs, or restricted crossing U-turn intersections. Brief agenda here is what are RCUTs, some terminology, defining the problem and where they're being used, some implementation status and results that we're seeing here in Wisconsin, and some public involvement or public engagement opportunities and resources. One thing, engineers have a variety of tools to address intersections and interchange safety issues. These all come with various names, shapes, and sizes. The one common thing that they have is removing conflict points, or those intersections and interchanges are designed to slow traffic down to reduce the overall severity of crashes if they actually occur. So what is an RCUT? According to FHWA, there are more than 50% of fatal and injury crashes occurring at or near intersections. Intersection safety and design research has led to the development of numerous innovative or alternative intersection designs to improve the safety at intersections. An RCUT is one of those types of alternative designs under that broader category of reduced conflict intersections, along with roundabouts and DDIs and things like that. An RCUT intersection is an alternative intersection design that alters how left turn and crossing movements occur. The minor road movements are adjusted so that they turn right, so they can't make that direct left and crossing maneuver. Instead, they turn right, and they use those U-turn intersections to complete the maneuver. These intersections simplify decision-making for drivers, and they minimize the potential for those higher severity crash types, such as head-on and angle crashes. RCUT intersections are one of FHWA's 28 proven safety countermeasures. FHWA's proven safety countermeasures are a collection of countermeasures and strategies that have been proven effective at reducing roadway fatalities and serious injury crashes on our nation's roadways. These were identified through various case studies and research across the U.S. As you can see on FHWA's website, there's 54% reduction in those fatal and serious injury crashes. There are two main categories of RCUT intersections. There's unsignalized RCUTs and signalized. Unsignalized RCUTs are often used to reduce those right angle crashes through that reduction in conflict points. Signalized RCUTs vary slightly, and they're most often used to increase capacity by improving signal progression along a signalized corridor. That's accomplished by simplifying operations, signal operations, so there is more available green time for a major roadway. Today's presentation is going to focus more on the unsignalized version of RCUT, because that's what WisDOT has been primarily using, but the same general principles apply to the signalized versions of RCUTs. Terminology. Everybody has a different name for them. The terminology varies between states, within states, and various regions across the U.S. For unsignalized RCUTs, they're sometimes called reduced conflict intersections, which we view as that broader category. J-turns, Michigan lefts are in some cases just intersections. The signalized versions tend to be just called super streets. Historically, WSDOT has referred to these as J-turns. FHWA's recently created several resources that term these as RCUTs. So going forward, WSDOT has adopted this name to move forward and just to align with FHWA's terminology and try to speak the same language. Defining the problem and where we're actually using them. WSDOT's focus using these intersections are primarily on our expressway facilities where we have at-grade intersections mixed in with an isolated interchange or so along a high-speed 4-lane divided roadway. These facilities tend to have higher speeds, often in the neighborhood of 55 or 65 miles an hour, which generally result in severe injuries when a crash does occur. At a traditional intersection, there's many conflict points where vehicles have the potential to collide, which I'll get into in a little bit. And any small error from a driver can result in those big consequences or severe injury. One of the most common crash types on our expressways is where we see a minor road vehicle trying to turn left or cross the major road, and they make it through that first series, those near side lanes, but then they get hit in the far side lanes. Since they're wider intersections, it's difficult for a driver to judge those speeds of oncoming vehicles on both the near side and far side to find a safe gap in traffic. Generally, these intersections are considered when interchanges aren't justified, or where the minor and major volumes are higher and there's fewer gaps existing in that major roadway, which leads to kind of those riskier behaviors, which often lead to crashes. Left turn and crossing maneuvers are two of the most dangerous movements a driver can make. At a traditional intersection, that driver has to focus on multiple things at a given time. In an urban environment, a driver has to pay attention to things like both directions of traffic, any driveways or restaurant traffic coming in and out, vehicle speeds approaching on both sets of lanes, visual obstructions, trees, and other factors. The same issues exist in a rural setting where the speeds are much higher and just a small error could lead to that significant crash. When fewer gaps exist on that main line, this often leads to that riskier behavior, which can lead to crashes. Often what happens is a left turn or crossing movement is done in a two-stage maneuver where that vehicle crosses the near side and stops in the median. And then when the vehicle or the driver is finishing their maneuver, they often misjudge the approach speed of those far lanes of traffic, which could lead to some serious injury crashes. Other situations where someone from the minor road may pull into that median, and then a mainline left turning vehicle comes up, and it just creates an uncomfortable and unfamiliar situation for drivers because it's not always clear who has the priority and how each driver should kind of navigate that situation to continue through the intersection. Another example that we see is with larger vehicles where they may attempt to cross, realize that they misjudged the speed or gap, and then they get stuck in the median and they overhang in the main line. So here's an example in Wisconsin at an expressway. In 5 years at this intersection, there were 26 crashes with 23 angle crashes and 11 significant injuries. Almost all of these angle crashes occurred in those far lanes where the driver was either attempting to turn or cross. So now we kind of define the problem is why are we using them? Well, the simple thing is it's a very safe intersection design. They're highly effective by relying on those U-turns to complete those left and through movements. This simplifies that driver's task, that driver's demand by having them focus on only one direction of traffic at a time so there's fewer mistakes made. When those riskier movements are eliminated, it significantly reduces the amount of conflict points at the intersection, and it reduces that potential for those injuries to occur. Another key benefit and principle of these is it maintains full access to the roadway, whereas some of our engineering countermeasures restrict everything. These intersections do not restrict access to the roadway facility, but they do displace those movements. Lastly, RCUTs are significantly less costly than some of our grade separated alternatives, like an overpass or an interchange. WSDOT, like many other public agencies, have very limited resources. And since these are proven to significantly reduce fatal and serious injury crashes, it aligns very well with our Vision Zero, our Zero in Wisconsin philosophy. Depending on how existing pavements and other site conditions are, generally we can build 5 to 20 RCUTs for the price tag of a single interchange. So now we'll get into the conflict points that I've been talking about. At a traditional intersection, there's 40 conflict points, with the majority of them being in that center middle part of the intersection. 24 of these conflict points are actually due to the crossing maneuvers. When we have an RCUT intersection, that cluster in the median is eliminated, and we reduce those conflict points significantly. And in this situation, it's 24, and we went from, 26, and we went from 24 crossing conflict points to 12 or less, depending on the presence of turn lanes and everything. So without those more serious conflict points where those crashes could often lead to those angle types, that's where we're seeing some of the most safety benefit from. So some of our Wisconsin RCUT designs, we've got several different variations. They largely depend on obviously site conditions, curve presence, traffic volumes, and even turning movement demands and other geographical factors. In general, there's 2 main versions. The number 1 is the extended turn lanes, and number 2 is the non-extended. With the extended version, if you come up on the main or the minor roadway, you stop, and we have extended turn lanes all the way to that center intersection where a vehicle can turn directly into that receiving left turn lane, follow it along, and complete their maneuver to turn left or continue across. On the non-extended versions, this number 2 here, the vehicle on the minor road would come up to the stop, and then turn into the near side lane, and then do a weaving maneuver over into that receiving left turn lane. The third variation here is largely just that there's no mainline direct left turn lanes into that minor roadway. Those are only when we use that option when the turn lanes aren't warranted due to the demand of that movement. One other design variation that we have is whether or not an RCUT has additional pavement for those larger vehicles. This is often referred to as a loon due to the unique shape of the pavement, matching kind of that loon bird's head. You can see from the picture on the right there that turning movement where that U-turn intersection would be follows kind of that path and creates that loon shape head. And we only use these where, these are dependent on obviously the amount of larger vehicles using this type of intersection and how many and the volumes. Wisconsin's implementation of RCUTs, we've been building RCUTs since 2011 on the state highway system. There's been 21 built as of the conclusion of the construction season last year. They're primarily being built to address the history of crashes, but the department has built several proactively in larger improvement projects that expanded roadways from undivided to divided facilities. They're primarily located on a couple different expressway corridors, and we have 10 planned in the next 4 to 5 years. So here's a quick map of where they all exist currently. As you can kind of see on the existing They're focused up more in the northwest part of the state on Highway 53. We've got a series of them on Highway 23 in the northeast region between Sheboygan and Fond du Lac. And there's also a couple planned and popping up in the northwest and north central region on Highway 29, as well as some in the southwest region. So evaluations. Here's a list of several RCUTs that have been built on the state highway system in the recent years. All of the locations on this have been built due to pre-existing safety issues where we're having those angle crashes. The next couple slides, I'll kind of go through a couple of these and show how well they're performing from just an observed before-after period to help show how effective they are at reducing those fatal and serious injury crashes. The first one I got on the screen is Highway 23 in County M in Sheboygan County. 10 years of before data, we had 14 angle crashes, and you'll see again, this one had more of those near side angle crashes, but there are a couple far side angle crashes. Of those 14 angle crashes, there were 9 injuries. In 2013, we built an RCUT, and the next 10 years of data, we cut those crash totals in half, and we had 1 angle crash with 1 injury. So we went from over 10 injuries down to 1 and cut the crash total in half. The example that I showed earlier, Highway 57 in County C in Door County, we had 5 years of before data here. 26 crashes, with 23 of them being angle crashes, with them primarily being those far side angle crashes. There were 19 overall injuries. We built an RCUT in 2015. After 8 years, we again cut that total in half, and we've had very few, only 1 injury and 1 angle crash associated with the turning movement. Another example is up in Washburn County in the northwest region of Highway 53. 10 years of before data, we had 20 crashes, with 15 of them being angle crashes, with almost all of those angle crashes leading to injuries. An RCUT was built in 2015, and after 8 years, we've cut that total in half, and we've had 1 injury since. Collectively, here's kind of a simple before-after analysis of all of those ones that I shared previously that were built to address pre-existing safety issues. Anything green, and I don't know how well it's coming up across here, but anything green that's positive shows a reduction in crashes, and anything red shows an increase in crashes. And right here, this column shows the fatal and serious injury crashes per year, and then this is all injury crashes per year, and this is property damage crashes per year. Excluding all of the locations that haven't existed for more than 3 years, so some of the ones on the bottom there, we're actually seeing about an 86% reduction in serious injury crashes per year and almost a 90% reduction in total injury crashes. We are seeing some, just from a before-after analysis, we are seeing an increase in property damage crashes. Several factors of this are mainly that the overall footprint of that intersection went from going from that one central intersection, and now we're looking at those adjacent U-turn intersections now. But overall, it's a trade-off where we're changing, or we still have the intersection there. We're changing those impact angles. So in turn, the crashes that do result don't result in those severe angle injury crashes. Another evaluation that we performed, the University of Wisconsin TOPS Lab completed an evaluation of 7 WisDOT projects that were built using Highway Safety Improvement Program funding. This analysis used a more robust analysis method called empirical Bayes that isn't just a simple before-after. Empirical Bayes accounts for variations over time, such as fluctuations in crashes and traffic volumes. Overall, The analysis showed very similar results in having over 70% reduction in those fatal and injury crashes, and we saw pretty much no change in the property damage crashes for those 7 sites. So with that, we're actually, when we compare our results to what FHWA has found nationwide, where they found there's approximately a 54% reduction in those fatal and injury crashes, we're actually seeing better results than what they found in that study. Now I'll switch over into the public involvement piece of these projects, which can be a challenge. Many of the challenges with public involvement on RCUTs is due to that driver unfamiliarity. Every location has unique needs and could have a unique design. There's no cookie cutter RCUT. Due to being a very unfamiliar intersection type, projects must educate the public on what these intersections are, how they operate, and the need, the why they're being proposed. Clear, consistent communication on the issues is needed for any given location. That need needs to be stressed throughout the public involvement, such as addressing that crash issue or a capacity issue, or helping mitigate concerns with those larger vehicle movements. Having pictures and videos very much helps illustrate those issues throughout the public involvement process. People are generally resistant to change. There may be people that don't see that need from their limited use of the intersection or spending extra resources to address that need, or there may be a general misunderstanding of why there are issues there and how these intersections are directly addressing those specific key issues. So for example, the picture I have on the screen here is where there's a factory in the shift change, and everybody's trying to get home at the same time. And what happens is there's generally a platoon of vehicles trying to turn left at this intersection at the same time, which leads to some risky behavior, people taking chances, multiple vehicles stacking up in that median, which doesn't lead to some great decision making when people are trying to turn into that major roadway when you have 65-mile-an-hour speeds. And I will play this short video clip which helps illustrate some of this. This video helps show where we have opposing left turning vehicles becoming confused, and the vehicle on the bottom overshoots where they're supposed to go and causes some confusion on that other left turning vehicle, and creates some confusion and risky maneuvers. And then when we have other vehicles entering the mix that we see in the state, such as a farming combine or motorcycles on the top of the screen, there's a lot to focus on for people. And when you got those higher speeds, it leads to some of those risky behaviors, which could result in crashes. So eventually the folks in the median there finish their turning movement once there's a safe gap, but they do kind of stack up in there where they should be keeping their eyes open and following the rules of the road. So communication and education throughout the public involvement process is very critical. As I mentioned earlier, RCUTs are an educational opportunity or requirement in a lot of cases, and we have to communicate that purpose of why we're proposing these types of intersections at a given location. So if we take the roundabouts as an example, Wisconsin's a leading state in the nation for roundabouts. We actually have 600 in the state, with kind of an even split between the state system and the local system, 300 on the state system. We've been successful with this by having that uniform message on the purpose of how they improve intersection safety. We're still seeing resistance to some of our alternative intersections throughout the public involvement process, but in many cases where we've actually been successful and built roundabouts, communities are now coming back to us asking for roundabouts at other locations in their community. The key points with RCUTs that should be communicated are it reduces those conflict points and it eliminates the most dangerous movements at an intersection, and it has that potential to reduce those severe injury crashes. It simplifies the driver's task, takes a lot of it out of on the driver itself by having us focus on one direction of traffic at a time. Motorists can still make all of the turning movements. It's important to emphasize with this that we're not taking anything away. We're just displacing certain movements along the roadway. Lastly, another concern that's often brought up is for those larger vehicles. These actually provide more storage room for larger trailers or large trucks to navigate that intersection, as well as improve their ability to make the maneuvers. Depending on what design gets built, there could actually be those extended turn lanes where there's concerns where that larger vehicle needs to turn into the near lane, get up to highway speed, along with all the other vehicles interacting, and then weave over. Depending on that design, we might have that receiving left turn lane to get to the U-turn intersection directly across, so they can just turn right across into that. Some resources that we've worked to develop. WSDOT has an RCUT webpage. There's also an FHWA Proven Safety Countermeasure webpage that has a lot of the nationwide studies and resources. WSDOT's RCUT webpage can be accessed by going to that main webpage. Up on the right side screen, you would click Safety. And from there, you would get to there's a drop down for safety engineering, which would bring you to the screen on the left. We've recently adjusted our safety engineering page to have different intersection interchange buttons. So once you click one of the buttons, so if you click the intersection button, it'll lead you to all of our intersection safety engineering web pages, where RCUT is one of them. Or you can simply just Google Wisconsin RCUTs and you'll find it in the top choices there. Other educational resources that we've been working to create. Last year we developed a couple videos. One video that we thought we learned that was a need through our public involvement process was having kind of a windshield screen version of how to drive one of these intersections. From what we hear with the DDIs and these types of intersections is they look very odd from above, and it creates a lot of confusion if you're not familiar with them. So we worked on getting a windshield screen or windshield version of that, plus a drone footage to show how vehicles navigate that that RCUT. Another thing that we learned from our partners to the west, Minnesota, they recently finished a research project about how to present some of these non-traditional traffic safety solutions within the public involvement process. What they discovered was generally the rural communities tend to react better to these types of intersections when there's a voice, an external voice or a credible voice helping communicate why they're effective and why we're using them. So we worked to create or get some testimonials on some of our successful projects, and that video was created last year as well. From that Minnesota research, there was also for the urban environments, kind of a mixed communication strategy was recommended. People tend to react better to like a presentation type of resource or statistics. So what we've been trying to do as we've been updating materials and creating additional materials is kind of have that mixed blend of communication materials to help out with people in the public involvement process. Another thing that we recently, just this past week, put on our website is we've got some informational handouts about how to drive them. We've got two different versions of a one-pager on how to drive them, because there's two different strategies for driving, one with extended turn lanes and one without. So those have been posted to our webpage. Lastly, the the other resources that we're still working on or working towards, we've got some design guidance for our facilities development manual that is hoping to come out sometime this fall. We also have a couple policies like for our lighting requirements that are in our traffic engineering manual. Those are also being looked at to get updated and sent out sometime this year. And that is all I've got today. Guess I'll open it up to questions if anybody has anything.
Hi, Joe Blakeman, St. Milwaukee. I have a couple of questions.
Mhm.
This is probably obviously from an urban point of view. Excuse me. Have you successfully deployed these with full pedestrian access through the main intersection? I know you mentioned this primarily is in high-speed rural applications, but a few of the pictures you showed that have median cut-throughs that didn't connect to anything. When we've installed these in the past, the bike and ped coordinators have requested put in a zebra crossing, actually, where we kind of cross diagonally through the splitter island. So I was wondering if you guys have implemented these at all with pedestrians, where there's actually a pedestrian demand.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know John Jenkins is on the call here today too, and he's kind of taken the lead on the design policy side of it. But I know we do have some crossing cut throughs on some of our rural applications, but there aren't too many, I guess, as you said, there's not much facilities on either side of our rural applications in most situations. John, I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, you've summed it up. We haven't yet had any in that urban environment. A lot of the ones that we have put in were more a bike crossing accommodation. There wasn't the pedestrian, but there was a bike need, so that's where those went. We're trying to get that guidance out for the rural application first, and as we go, move into the urban where we know they're working very well. Well, the concept is working very well. We want to get them into urban where we can.
Oh, and just one other question. Have you had to deal with fire trucks and those types of vehicles and complaints about the excessive time it takes to navigate one of these?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of our coordination with local agencies on these. Some of our earlier locations had much farther U-turn locations, upwards of 2,000 feet downstream. Now, some of our newer designs, we're shrinking those U-turn locations up, which reduces that amount of time that they have to get redirected. With it being newer, it's like I was saying during the presentation, educating the public on these intersections and how they're useful to address a need is just an ongoing thing. That communication, we have to make that communication line to those local officials as well. And I think in a lot of cases, we've been able to address a lot of their concerns. One of our RCUTs is actually, there's a fire station on one side of the road. So that does come up a lot.
There was a study, I can't recall if it was in Minnesota or Missouri, that was analyzed. I think the Minnesota one was looking at larger vehicles, and they found that the time difference was actually less because, again, for major vehicles, not EMS, because the difference in time to get downstream to the U-turn was about equivalent to the time you had to wait for finding a gap in both directions instead of just one and getting there. There was the other study was talking about, I think they had looked at putting mountable curb in those median islands so ambulances and fire trucks could just jump the curb and get to the other side. And after a couple of months of this being open, ambulances just went down to the next U-turn and came back. They didn't bother going over the curb anymore because they didn't find that need.
William, I see you got a question.
Yeah, thanks. It's Bill Bremer from the TOPS Lab in Madison. And address the comment about urban situations that the city of Milwaukee had. City of Madison completed last fall an RCUT on a arterial in Madison. And it's on a downgrade, and there was quite a few accidents over the years to the point that they had prohibited cross traffic, but there was concern that there was still with turning movements. And so what they did was made an RCUT, added that feature last year. But they did continue and upgraded the ability for bicycles and pedestrians to go through and cross. And I think it's obviously too early to really tell what the statistics will show, but I think there hasn't been any issues to date that I'm aware of, and I think it's going to be a success. So I think, you know, that they can be the bicyclists and pedestrians can still cross safely, and with requiring the traffic to make the RCUT in the southbound direction.
Do you have the location of that, Bill?
Whitney Way and Hammersley.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for that. Any other questions?
Hey, Dan, this is John Campbell.
John?
Yeah, great presentation. Love this topic. I think this is a great solution. It's a way that we can actually eliminate serious injuries and fatalities. I had a question regarding your public involvement and education components of it, because that's such a crucial part to this. How about like the loon design you talked about earlier? One thing I've noticed sometimes in some of the videos we've had of RCUTs is vehicles, actually drivers going out into that loon and stopping there and using it as like a point to just wait for a gap in traffic. Have you guys encountered that at all on any of the RCUTs you've been working on? Or it was kind of a scary thing to see. I'm like, oh boy.
Yeah, not too many of our locations have loons. I don't know, John, with you working with the design teams on a couple that we're designing that have them, I don't know if that's came up as a concern.
It didn't come up as a concern. A lot of the ones that we have, part of that's dependent on median width. So if you've got sufficient width, you can make that turn a little bit easier. It depends on vehicles and a couple other things. I haven't heard of people in the loon waiting for the gap. A lot of times you've already got that right turn lane. It's more a case of that's leading into you're in the right turn lane accelerating while someone in the right turn lane is decelerating would be the only conflict I'd be most concerned about. But if there's a gap there, I haven't seen people or heard of people waiting there. Honestly, we've got more questionable movements because this is so new, where people see the bike crossing and figure, well, I got a 4x4, I can make it, that type of thing.
Good. How do you traffic count one of these, Dan?
Good question. I don't believe we've done any traffic counts at any of our locations post-construction. That was actually asked of us as part of a research project, and I don't believe we've done any of those. But excellent question. Something we will be working to figure out.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Any other questions? Bill?
Yeah, thanks. I think when Greg Helgeson was instrumental in getting one of the first RCUTs up on Highway 53, he ran into a lot of objections from a local property owner who had I think a store, not a gas station, and store on one of the quadrants, and was concerned that he was going to lose a lot of business. But I don't know. I think the project, it was built, and I think it was turned out to be very successful. But I think, you know, those are the concerns that you're going to run into with some local opposition on some of the projects is property owners in some of those quadrants, that they're concerned that they're going to lose business. But I think trying to improve the safety is is instrumental in, and if not, trying to make sure that people can safely get to their establishments, I think is the point that has to be made when you go into the public involvement, especially with those local property owners that are adjoining right at the intersection. Great presentation. Great presentation.
Thanks. Kate?
Yes, great presentation. Thank you. One thing that I was just thinking about is that ITE created the UIG, the Unsignalized Intersection Improvement Guide, several years ago now, and I believe it was the audience it was intended for is locals that may not have a transportation engineer on staff to identify safety improvements that they could make at unsignalized intersections, and get reasoning for them and filter through to identify what they could do. And I'm wondering if this would be a good addition to the UIG. And I don't know if it's maintained, but I recall that there was a woman in Wisconsin that was instrumental in putting it together. So that this might be a good safety treatment to merge into that list. Just a thought.
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with that guide, but I can look into that and kind of see where things stand.
I
Yeah.
can send a link too.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Looks like Brian Porter sent a comment in saying he saw a recent NCHRP proposal to update that guide. So hopefully RCUTs will be part of it, or we can reach out and make sure it does happen.
Any other questions? All right. Well, I'm not hearing anything. Yeah, I guess what I'll say is thanks everybody for letting me talk about that. Also, if anybody has any other topics, Christian and I would be greatly appreciative of you suggesting those to us, whether it's something that you may think of right after this meeting or just between meetings. I think we're still aiming to have meetings 3 times a year. So one in that summer timeframe. I think we've been shooting for July typically, and then one in the fall. So if something comes up or your community is looking at doing something innovative or with something like maybe speed management, it'd be a great topic to potentially share with our group. Feel free to reach out to Christian or myself. Yeah. Christian, got anything else to say?
No, I don't. Yeah, thank you for giving this presentation. It was very, very good and informative, and can help out throughout the state.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for hopping on. About a 45-minute meeting. That's pretty good. So hope everyone has a great rest of your day and week, and we'll send out info about the next meeting in the future.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Nice work, Dan.